You look absolutely stunning tonight, darling.
Oh, you always say the sweetest things.
They certainly know how to put on a show, don't they?
It feels like we're in a movie.
She became his sixth wife, a life wrapped in gold guarded by secrets. To the world she was powerful, adored, envied, untouchable. But behind the mansion gates, her heart whispered a truth no one could see. She was living in a beautiful prison, every smile rehearsed, every step watched, every choice controlled. And when she finally dared to dream of freedom, she discovered something far more dangerous than his love, the empire he would destroy to keep her. This is her story, her escape, her rebirth. Subscribe to Madame Red, and step into the story. The red carpet lights blurred into a cascade of fireflies as Liora stepped out of the sleek black limousine, her heart drumming a rhythm that seemed almost orchestral. Cameras flashed, capturing every twirl of her satin gown, every flick of her golden hair. She smiled, bright, perfect, luminous, but inside a wild storm of anticipation churned. And then she saw him, Malik, towering in his tailored suit, a presence that seemed to command the entire boulevard without a word. His eyes, dark and calculating yet softened by a rare smile, landed on her. In that moment the world shrank to a single point. Him, the invisible thread pulling them together. "Liora," he said, his voice a velvet caress. "You look unreal." She laughed, the sound tinkling like glass, a little nervous, a little bewitched. "And you look like you own the city," she replied, her pulse betraying her casual tone. That night was intoxicating. Malik led her through clusters of glittering socialites and flashing cameras, whispering names of influential friends she'd only read about in magazines. Every word, every gesture, made her feel like she had been plucked from her ordinary life and placed at the center of a universe she hadn't dared to dream about. Within a week, their conversations had turned from polite flattery to intimate confessions. Malik spoke of legacy, ambition, and dreams that stretched wider than the skyline. Liora, entranced, found herself revealing pieces of herself she'd never shared. Secrets, fears, ambitions, even the quiet ache of wanting to be seen beyond the red carpet glow. By the end of the third week, the proposal came. It was a quiet evening, just the two of them on the private balcony of Malik's towering penthouse, the city lights twinkling like stars mirrored on the concrete below. Malik knelt, a simple band in his hand, but the weight it carried was monumental. "Liora, I don't want to waste a single moment of our lives apart. Will you marry me?" His voice held no pressure, only certainty, the kind that makes one believe in inevitability rather than choice. Liora's mind spun. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the premiere, and already, she was standing at the precipice of a life she could barely imagine. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling, heart soaring. The news exploded across social media like wildfire. Paparazzi photos of her sparkling ring flooded feeds. News outlets heralded the union of the young actress and the enigmatic billionaire. Liora felt like a goddess lifted on gilded wings. She had always craved excitement, adventure, recognition, and now she had all three, delivered with an elegance that seemed almost fantastical. Yet, beneath the golden glow of the villa at sunset, a different sensation began to stir. A soft, nagging unease she couldn't quite name. Malik's attentions, once thrilling, started to feel like invisible threads tying her every move to his gaze. He would ask where she was going, with whom, and at what time she would return. At first, she laughed it off as care, as devotion. But the questions kept coming, precise and pointed, as though the smallest deviation could break some unspoken rule. Friends she had known for years were now filtered through Malik's scrutiny. Meetings were postponed or canceled under his casual insistence that she should trust him to know what's best. One evening, as she prepared to attend a charity gala, Malik appeared in the doorway of her suite, shadow stretching across the marble floor. "Are you sure your friend from the premiere is appropriate company?" he asked, his tone easy but carrying a weight that made her stomach twist. "I think so," she answered, uncertainty lacing her voice. She wanted to tell him it didn't matter, that her friendship should be hers alone, but the timbre of his voice, the certainty of his presence, silenced her. Liora laughed nervously, smoothing the fabric of her gown. "I'll be back early," she added, more to convince herself than him. He smiled, just enough to soften the edges of his dominance. "Good girl," he said, and that simple phrase made her heart leap and falter at the same time. Excitement and fear began to intertwine in a tangled knot inside her chest. In public, everything remained a fairy tale. They posed for cameras, laughed at jokes she barely heard, and his hand on her lower back felt like the warmest embrace in the world. But behind the cameras, the undercurrent of control whispered a warning. Liora felt it in the subtle tightening of her chest whenever he called, the way her plans seemed to shrink in the presence of his expectations. It was intoxicating, yes, but now edged with a quiet tension she couldn't ignore. The weeks passed in a blur of galas, premieres, and private soirees. Liora's days were gilded and luxurious, yet the hours when she was alone began to feel strangely oppressive. She noticed how Malik would casually remark on her clothing, her social media posts, the friends she allowed into her inner circle. Nothing he said was overtly cruel. In fact, he always framed it as protection or care. But each word left a shadow creeping over the glow of her early excitement. One night, after a particularly extravagant premiere, Liora found herself standing on the balcony alone, staring at the lights of the city like a sea of fireflies. The champagne buzz still tickled her veins, but her thoughts were no longer entirely enchanted. Had she really chosen this life, or had it been chosen for her? A sudden shadow fell across the balcony. Malik had joined her silently, his gaze fixed on hers. He didn't speak at first. He never needed to. The presence alone was enough to make her pulse quicken, her lips part. "Do you love me?" he asked finally, his voice soft but insistent. Liora hesitated. She wanted to say yes, to tell him that this whirlwind romance had enchanted her utterly. But her mind rebelled against the simplicity of the question. Love? Or possession masquerading as love? Before she could answer, he leaned closer, eyes intense, and whispered, "Because once you belong to me, I will take care of everything. Even the choices you think are yours." Her breath caught. The city lights shimmered behind him like stars, but the beauty of it all felt suddenly fragile. For the first time, Liora realized that the love she had been swept up in might come with chains hidden in silk gloves. The thrill, the romance, the promise of everything she had dreamed of. They were all real, yes, but something darker lurked beneath. As she turned away, trying to hide the sudden chill creeping down her spine, her phone buzzed with a message from a friend she hadn't seen in weeks. "Liora, are you okay? You've been distant. We miss you." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Could she even respond freely? Or had her life already begun to belong to someone else entirely? And as the wind tousled her hair and the villa's gates gleamed in the fading sun, Liora felt the first twinge of a question she hadn't dared ask before. Had she truly fallen in love, or had she already begun to lose herself? Her heart raced as she turned back toward the shadows where Malik stood, the weight of his presence both thrilling and terrifying. And at that moment, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, the click of a door shutting somewhere deep in the villa, made her instinctively glance toward the mansion's inner corridors. Somewhere behind the glittering facade of wealth and romance, a secret was waiting, and Liora had no idea that her whirlwind fairy tale was about to spiral into something she could not have imagined. The morning sun spilled through towering windows, painting stripes of gold across the polished marble floors of Malik's mansion. Liora walked the grand hallway, her heels clicking softly, the sound echoing like a timid heartbeat. Portraits of ancestors and opulent art lined the walls, each one staring down with silent judgment. She felt like a trespasser in a palace that was supposed to be hers now. Yet she could not shake the feeling of being constantly observed. Her excitement from the whirlwind romance still fluttered inside her, like a butterfly trapped in a crystal jar. The grandeur was intoxicating. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, Persian rugs stretched like rivers of color, and the scent of fresh flowers mixed with the faint aroma of polished wood. Liora had dreamed of luxury, of beauty, of a life that shimmered beyond her ordinary existence. Now she had it, but even in the midst of splendor, a subtle unease coiled in her chest. "Breakfast is ready," Malik's deep voice rumbled from behind her. She turned, startled, to see him in a crisp, tailored suit, standing perfectly still as if he were carved from marble. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied her, and though he smiled, it felt less like warmth and more like an evaluation. "You slept well?" he asked, voice smooth. "Yes," she murmured, forcing a smile, feeling suddenly smaller in the vast space around her. The breakfast room was a cathedral of gold accents and polished wood. A long table stretched the length of the room, laden with exotic fruits, delicate pastries, and steaming coffee that smelled of indulgence. Liora felt her mouth water, but her appetite faltered under Malik's silent scrutiny. At the table, he began to speak of schedules, events, and the people she should meet. Each suggestion came as a statement rather than a request. She realized slowly that her life would now be choreographed. Every movement planned, every interaction filtered. The thrill of being chosen by a powerful man was now shadowed by the invisible leash he had begun to wrap around her. Days turned into weeks. Liora floated through her new life like a guest in a dream she had once longed for. Servants moved like whispers along the corridors, fulfilling her smallest whims with a perfection that was almost intimidating. The mansion itself seemed to breathe, grand and imposing, each echoing step reminding her that she was no longer merely a young actress in the city. She was now the center of an empire. And yet, the enchantment came with its cracks. Malik's attention was relentless. He would call her at the oddest hours, asking where she was, who she was speaking to, and when she would return. He spoke of care, of protection, of ensuring her safety, but his insistence often made her feel trapped rather than sheltered. Invitations to old friends were politely declined, subtly dismissed under the guise of "you need rest after long days." Slowly, the social circle she had cherished began to shrink, dissolving under the weight of Malik's invisible influence. One afternoon, as Liora wandered through the private library, she discovered an elegant lounge chair bathed in the soft glow of a window. She sank into it, a book in hand, but her thoughts refused to focus on the pages. The mansion's vastness, which once felt like a playground, now pressed down on her shoulders. She began to notice patterns, small, almost imperceptible rules she had to follow. Meetings with friends were curtailed. Even her choice of outfits was subtly guided by Malik's comments, framed as compliments but carrying an edge that left her uncertain. That night, Liora stood before the golden mirror in her bedroom, brushing her hair slowly, watching the reflection of a face that seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign. The flicker of candlelight danced across her features, highlighting a tension she had not allowed herself to admit until now. From the doorway, Malik's silhouette loomed, tall and silent, observing her every movement. "You look tired," he murmured, his voice soft but with an undertone that made her spine shiver. I'm fine," she replied, avoiding his eyes, gripping the brush like a lifeline. "You must remember," he said, stepping closer. "There is a world out there that wants to distract you. Friends, colleagues, they cannot protect you the way I can. You must trust me to guide you." It was framed as care, as concern, yet each word was a subtle tether, binding her to his perception of safety. Liora felt a flicker of rebellion, a desperate urge to remind him that she could think, choose, and move on her own. But the words caught in her throat. His presence, so commanding, had a way of swallowing her confidence. She spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, haunted by the soft whisper of control disguised as affection. She loved the attention, the protection, the thrill of being at the center of Malik's world, but a gnawing uncertainty settled in her chest. Was this love? Or was it ownership? The days blurred into a rigid rhythm. Appearances, dinners, meetings, photo shoots, private lessons in etiquette and poise. Liora's life became a delicate dance of perfection, where one misstep could disrupt the fragile balance of approval. She noticed that her own desires, her own impulses, were beginning to feel foreign, almost forbidden. Conversations with old friends became awkward, strained, laden with the unspoken knowledge that Malik's gaze extended farther than she had ever imagined. One evening, as she sipped champagne on the balcony overlooking the mansion gardens, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The sky was painted with bruised shades of purple and gold. For the first time since the whirlwind courtship, she felt alone. Not physically, but emotionally. The thrill of the early days had faded into a quiet apprehension, a sensation that she was simultaneously adored and confined. Her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Liora, we haven't seen you in weeks. Everything okay?" Her fingers hovered over the screen, a silent battle raging in her chest. Could she answer honestly? Could she explain the subtle, invisible cage of gilded luxury that now held her? Before she could decide, Malik appeared behind her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I've noticed you've been distracted," he said softly. "There are influences you cannot control. You need to remember where your loyalty lies." Liora forced a smile, her heart hammering. Loyalty? To whom? To the man who had swept her into a whirlwind of wealth and attention, or to the life she had left behind? She felt the first real pangs of isolation that would define her days within the mansion gates. The walls that gleamed like gold also felt like bars, and the people who should have been her support were now distant, filtered through Malik's careful watch. As she looked down at the sprawling estate, the fountains glittering in the moonlight, a cold whisper of doubt curled around her thoughts. Am I living my dream? Or someone else's? The mansion was beautiful, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. And as Malik's shadow blended with the darkened corners of the hall, Liora realized with a sinking feeling that the true test of her heart, her will, and her freedom was only just beginning. Her pulse quickened as she retreated into her bedroom, locking the door behind her, the golden mirror reflecting her anxious face. Somewhere deep within the vast walls of the mansion, secrets stirred, waiting to unfold, and Liora had no idea how deeply she had already been entwined in them. The grand hall glittered with chandeliers that spilled golden light over polished floors. Guests laughed, clinking glasses, unaware of the tension that wrapped around Liora like a second skin. She sat straight, hands folded on her lap, smiling politely, but every fiber of her being felt frayed. Malik sat beside her, his presence quiet but heavy. A soft hand on hers at first, reassuring, almost tender. Yet beneath that touch was a weight, a subtle claim, a reminder that she was no longer moving through the world on her own. Each word he whispered in her ear was carefully measured, a gentle pressure that made her doubt her own thoughts. "You're doing well," he said, voice smooth as silk. "But remember, this is a world where appearances matter. You must be perfect." Liora nodded, trying to smile. She wanted to feel proud, to enjoy the accolades that came with being the center of attention. But the words clung to her, lingering like a shadow over every gesture, every laugh. She wondered if the warmth she felt was genuine, or if it was just part of the invisible rules she was expected to follow. Dinner continued. Conversations, laughter, and polite jokes floated over her, but Liora's mind was elsewhere. She noticed how Malik's eyes subtly scanned the room, measuring reactions, guiding her posture, her smile, her very energy. First it felt protective. Now it felt suffocating. Even in private, the rules were just as strict. Malik's expectations were no longer suggestions. They were silent commands she was meant to follow. Morning routines, evening outings, even the tone of her voice became a measure of obedience. "Why did you smile at him?" he asked one evening, referring to a fellow actor at an event. His tone was soft, almost casual, yet it carried the weight of judgment. "I didn't," Liora started, but stopped. The words felt dangerous. Malik's calm, measured look froze her, and she found herself shrinking inward, questioning if her instincts were wrong, if her reactions were always flawed. At first, these moments were subtle, isolated, but over time they became a constant undercurrent, whispering that her choices were never fully hers. Even her laughter, once free and bright, now needed to be approved, measured, molded to fit a standard she didn't understand. One rainy afternoon, Liora found herself alone in the mansion library. Velvet armchairs and towering bookshelves created a cocoon of quiet, but the solitude only made her heart ache more. In her hands she held a photograph, A candid shot of her and an old friend, smiling freely in sunlight. Her eyes lingered on it, remembering laughter that had once felt effortless, life that had belonged only to her. She felt the first pangs of real loneliness. The mansion with all its luxury was a gilded cage. "You're thinking too much." Malik's voice broke the silence, low and calm, yet carrying a quiet threat. His shadow fell across the room as he stepped closer, eyes studying her with precision. "You must remember, the world outside here does not care for you. Only I do. Only I understand what is best." Liora's fingers tightened around the photograph. The warmth of old memories clashed with the icy weight of the present. He framed his control as care, his manipulation as protection, and somehow that made it harder to resist. "You must trust me," he whispered, stepping closer. "Because if you don't, I cannot protect you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to reclaim her autonomy, but the words felt trapped behind a wall of fear and doubt. Could she survive a confrontation? Could she even define where love ended and control began? The days that followed were a dance of tension and fear. Malik would praise her when she complied, offering smiles and compliments that felt like rare gifts. When she faltered even slightly, the subtle correction would leave her questioning her judgment, her memory, her own instincts. Liora began to notice herself changing. She second-guessed everything. What she wore, what she said, whom she spoke to. Friends reached out, but she hesitated to reply. Invitations she once would have accepted now felt dangerous, like testing boundaries she was afraid to push. Each time she hesitated, Malik's quiet shadow seemed to hover closer. Small incidents became tests she could not win. A delayed reply to a message would earn a pointed look. A social media post that didn't meet his approval would be questioned. "Are you sure you want to share that?" One night, after a gala, she returned to the villa trembling. Malik met her at the entrance, his smile slow and deliberate. "You're tired," he said. "I can see it. But you must remember your place, Liora. Perfection isn't just for public eyes. It is for me, for us." She tried to speak, to tell him that the constant surveillance made her feel trapped, but he held up a hand. "Not tonight. Rest. Tomorrow you will understand." She went to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. Her reflection in the mirror stared back, a woman dressed in beauty and luxury, yet a stranger to herself. The mansion's walls seemed taller, the shadows deeper. And for the first time, Liora felt a real fear, that the person she was becoming might no longer be her own. The tension came to a head one evening during a private dinner for close acquaintances. Liora, nervous and uneasy, tried to navigate polite conversation while Malik observed every word, every laugh, every gesture. "You seem distracted," he said, leaning close, his tone casual but carrying the weight of accusation. I'm fine," Liora murmured, forcing a smile. "You must understand, Liora," he said, voice soft but firm. "You are not just anyone. The way you behave reflects on us both. Choices have consequences." The words hit her like ice. Her chest constricted. Every instinct screamed that she was being cornered, manipulated, yet she couldn't escape. Was this love? Or was it a subtle imprisonment? A gilded chain around her heart and mind? She tried to find solace in her thoughts, in memories of her old life, but they felt distant, fragile. Malik's world was a carefully constructed cage, beautiful, glittering, suffocating. And as the chandeliers shimmered overhead and the guests chatted obliviously, Liora realized with a cold certainty that the chains around her were no longer invisible. She was trapped, not by walls but by influence, expectation, and the man who claimed to love her. Somewhere deep in the night, she whispered into the darkness, "How did my dream become this? How do I reclaim myself? Before it's too late." Her voice trembled in the empty hall. Outside, the mansion seemed to settle, patient, knowing. Malik's shadow lingered, longer, closer, waiting for the next moment he would shape her world. The night stretched ahead, heavy with uncertainty. Liora's heart beat with a mix of fear, desire, and defiance. She knew that the next confrontation, the one she could no longer avoid, would define everything. Rain battered the mansion windows like an urgent drum, each drop a sharp reminder of the storm raging inside Liora's chest. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the sheets of water smear the lights of the estate into ghostly trails. Her fingers trembled. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. For the first time since the whirlwind romance began, she allowed herself to feel the depth of her fear. The grandeur, the luxury, the glittering nights of attention. All of it was no longer a dream. It had become a cage. Her phone buzzed, a tiny beacon in the storm. It was a message from her older brother. A voice from the world she had almost left behind. "Liora, I'm worried about you. Are you okay? Please let me help." She typed a reply, hesitated, deleted it. What could she say? That she was trapped, constantly monitored, living in a mansion that seemed more like a gilded prison? That the man she once thought was her salvation had begun to control every breath she took? The message from her brother felt like a lifeline, a thread back to reality. But she also knew that Malik would notice any unsanctioned communication, any action he considered disloyal. One wrong move, and the consequences would ripple far beyond her. The days in the mansion had begun to blur into a rhythm of obedience. Malik's expectations, once subtle, had grown heavier, more pointed. He framed every restriction as protection, every control as care. But Liora could no longer ignore the cost. Her friends were distant, her family just a name on her heart, and her own thoughts felt as though they were shadowed, watched. Late one evening, she found herself in the library again, hidden between the shelves of books that smelled of dust and old leather. She remembered how it had felt to be free there once, to breathe in the quiet, to exist without instruction or judgment. She closed her eyes, imagining herself outside, running without a leash, laughing freely under the sun. The daydream lasted only seconds before Malik's deep voice broke the spell. "You shouldn't be hiding, Liora," he said from the doorway. "You belong in the light. Shadows don't suit you." She flinched, clutching the book to her chest. The threat wasn't in the words but in the calmness, the certainty. He didn't need to raise his voice. She already understood. Shadows were dangerous. Silence was dangerous. Her own thoughts were dangerous. That night she couldn't sleep. The room felt smaller than ever. Every footstep in the hallway, every rustle of curtains, every distant murmur of servants echoed like warnings. She finally rose, heart pounding, and crept toward her closet. Behind the clothes, hidden beneath the folds of gowns and coats, she had stashed a small suitcase, the first tentative step toward freedom. Crouched on the floor, fingers tight around the handle, she imagined the streets beyond the mansion gates. Could she slip away without Malik noticing? Could she survive on her own? Questions gnawed at her, feeding the knot of fear and hope in her chest. A sudden sound, a door clicking somewhere far away, made her freeze. Shadows stretched across the corridor, long and menacing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide. Yet a deeper part of her feared that moving could trigger consequences she couldn't escape. Her mind raced. She thought of her family, vulnerable to the reach of Malik's power. Friends, once anchors in her life, now seemed distant and fragile, too far to help. And Malik, the man she had once trusted, adored, and even depended on, loomed over every plan, every thought like a silent predator. Liora pressed herself into the shadows of the corridor, holding the suitcase like a talisman. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the rain, "I cannot stay here forever. I must find a way. I will find a way." Days turned into restless nights. Malik's manipulation grew more precise. Praise was a reward for compliance. Criticism a subtle weapon designed to keep her constantly questioning herself. One evening, he cornered her in the main hall. "You're distant," he said softly, eyes narrowing. "I see it. You must remember your role. You cannot let distractions weaken you." Liora felt the words like chains closing around her chest. She wanted to scream, to push him away, to reclaim even a fraction of her freedom. Yet, the man she loved, or had loved, had a presence so commanding that it silenced her courage. She found herself walking the halls alone, trying to escape the suffocating warmth of his control, and for the first time she considered an impossible plan, to leave at least for a little while to taste freedom again. Her mind swirled with what-ifs and maybes. Could she vanish into the night unnoticed? Could she contact her family safely? Could she survive without the wealth, the protection, the world Malik had constructed around her? The questions spun faster than her heartbeat. And then one night, as rain lashed against the windows and the shadows of the mansion stretched like dark fingers, she heard the soft click of the servants' doors. A lull in the quiet, a fleeting moment, the chance she had been waiting for. Liora grabbed the suitcase, heart racing, palms slick with sweat. She crouched in the dim hallway, listening, waiting, shadows pressing around her like living walls. She imagined the gates, the streets, the first breath of freedom outside the mansion. But even as she moved a step, a cold whisper of doubt tugged at her mind. What if he notices? What if he punishes me? What if my family? Her pulse thundered in her ears. The suitcase felt heavier than ever. The hallway seemed longer, darker, stretching into infinity. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet another louder voice told her, "This is your life. Your freedom. You cannot stay." The mansion loomed behind her like a giant, watching, waiting. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, and Liora realized with a sharp, sickening clarity that tonight, she would have to choose. Stay in gilded captivity, or risk everything for a chance at freedom. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. She drew a shaky breath. Every nerve in her body screamed that she could not remain. Yet the next step, the one that could lead to escape, was uncertain, dangerous, and possibly irreversible. And somewhere deep in the mansion, Malik's shadow seemed to shift, silent but inevitable, waiting to see if she would dare defy him. The first light of dawn painted the city in shades of gold and rose, casting a hopeful glow over the concrete jungle below. Liora stood on the rooftop, her hair whipping around her face in the cool morning wind. The suitcase at her side felt heavier than ever, filled not just with clothes but with months of fear, regret, and dreams she had almost forgotten. For a long moment, she simply stood there, breathing in the crisp air, letting the warmth of the sun touch her cheeks. This was her moment, a fragile, precious instant where the world felt vast, and freedom seemed almost tangible. She glanced back at the mansion in the distance, its towers gleaming in the sunrise, beautiful yet cold, a gilded prison she was finally ready to leave behind. Her heart pounded, adrenaline and fear mingling in a dizzying rhythm. Tonight, or perhaps this very morning, she would reclaim herself. The plan had been simple, careful, but terrifying. Malik's routines, his watchful eyes, the subtle traps he set. She had studied them all. There was one small window, one brief moment of vulnerability in the estate's staff rotations and his attention. She would take it no matter the risk. As she descended the stairwell, each step felt like an eternity. The familiar halls, once a symbol of grandeur, now pressed in like walls of a cage. Portraits and chandeliers seemed to watch her, silent witnesses to her defiance. She forced herself to ignore the whispers in her mind, the doubts, the fears, the questions of whether she was being reckless. This was freedom, and she would not be turned back. She reached the grand hall, the heart of the mansion, where every echo carried weight and meaning. Malik stood there, as if he had been waiting for her, a shadow stretching across the polished marble floor. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned her, and for a fleeting second, she thought he might simply let her go. "You're leaving," he said, voice calm but carrying a storm beneath it. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm leaving. And I won't come back." He took a step closer, the distance between them charged with all the power he had wielded over her for months. "Do you think you can just walk away? Everything you are, everything you have, it belongs here to me." Liora met his gaze, heart pounding, every nerve on fire. "No. Nothing you gave me was real. You tried to own me, but I belong to myself. Not to you. Not to anyone." For a moment, silence stretched like a living thing between them. Then Malik's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing further. The power he had held so carefully, silently, suddenly felt fragile in the face of her defiance. Liora stepped forward, suitcase in hand. The sound of wheels on the marble floor echoed like a drumbeat of liberation. She didn't look back. As she left the hall, whispers of mansion secrets seemed to brush against her mind. Doors she had never dared open, rooms she had glimpsed but never entered, hints of the hidden power and influence Malik wielded beyond the gilded walls. She realized she had narrowly avoided becoming just another shadow in his empire. The front gates loomed ahead. Servants passed in their daily routines, oblivious to her escape, and she slipped past them with careful steps, heart hammering. Every sound felt amplified. The click of her heels, the flap of the gate, the distant call of birds greeting the morning. Outside, the world was awakening, bright and chaotic, alive with possibilities. Liora drew a deep breath, the taste of freedom crisp and exhilarating. For the first time in months, she felt the raw thrill of being untethered, alive on her own terms. She didn't stop at the mansion gates. She walked fast, suitcase rolling behind her, until the towers disappeared behind a cluster of trees. She found a taxi, then a small hotel, and finally a quiet corner of the city where she could sit, breathe, and allow herself to feel safe. Her phone buzzed with messages from family and friends, anxious, loving, and relieved. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of release, of victory, of finally reclaiming her life. She remembered the skyline, the city she had always loved before fame and wealth had ensnared her. She felt the sun on her face, the wind in her hair, and a lightness she had almost forgotten. That evening, Liora sat at a small cafe, writing in a notebook she had brought along. She wrote not just about events but about herself, her thoughts, her dreams, her fears, and the lessons she had learned. The mansion, Malik, the chains of control, they were all behind her now, memories she could examine and learn from, not prisons that defined her. Freedom was not just the absence of control. It was reclaiming herself, her choices, her life. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that she could be happy again. The road ahead would not be simple. Rebuilding her life, repairing relationships, facing the world alone, it would be a challenge. But for the first time, Liora felt the thrill of being truly alive, truly independent. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the city, Liora stood on the rooftop once again. She opened her suitcase, looking at the few belongings she had carried from a life that almost consumed her. She smiled, a quiet, steady smile, and whispered to herself, "I am free. I belong to me. And I will never let anyone take that away again." The city stretched out endlessly, alive with possibilities. Somewhere far below, the mansion still stood, silent and imposing, a reminder of what she had survived. But Liora no longer feared it. She had reclaimed her power, her life, and her voice. And with that, she stepped forward, suitcase in hand, ready to walk into a life she would define on her own terms.
She walks like fire, talks like